It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and I'm here today with an individual that we had on the podcast a long time ago. We are, at the time of recording this, we are up to episode 246 or 47. I forget. Anyway, this individual was on episode 65, and he asked me or reached out to me, and we've talked, and we became friends after episode 65, and he and his wife are just wonderful members of our Northwest Arkansas community. Shout out to Kelly Robbins. But Nick Robbins is the executive director of Returning Home, which is an outstanding program in Northwest Arkansas. They have their original location, which is in Springdale. And that's where I met Nick. And I was just really taken aback by his personal story, which you'll need to listen to on episode 65 of the podcast. And we will link that up in the show notes. But we're here today to talk about the expansion of Returning Home and the work that he's doing with individuals that are coming out of incarceration. And, you know, everybody, to a person, a man, woman, deserves a second chance. I firmly believe that. And I would say that Nick is doing everything in his earthly power to help provide those second chances to individuals. He's been blessed with an outstanding facility, both in Springdale as well as this one that I just came to visit in Huntsville. And so I came out today to hear more about Nick's story and also for him to share with our I Am Northwest Arkansas audience what's happening in our community and what you can do to help out those that may need a second chance, especially if they're coming out of a situation of incarceration. And a lot of times when we talk about that, and I've had conversations with people that have said, hey, can you help me? I'm a felon. I can't get a job. I don't have opportunities available to me that everybody else does. You know, what am I going to do? I'm going to end up back out on the streets. And that is the constant refrain that a lot of people that have been through incarceration, that's the refrain that they feel and that they have. And Nick is trying to create an alternative for these individuals. And so I wanted to bring Nick back on to talk a little bit more about Returning Home. And he's here today. So without further ado, I want to welcome Nick Robbins to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, Randy. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for what you're doing in our community with this podcast. You're such a connector.
Yeah.
And people's stories are so unique.
Yep.
And when you find out somebody does great work, there's always this story behind it, right? This foundation that kind of created them to then launch out into this passion. And so it's always exciting to hear people's stories of why they do what they do in our community.
Well, yeah. And you know, I mean, again, everybody has a story. I say it all the time. Yeah. And I mean, stories matter. And so I'm always telling people you should share your story both far and wide because you don't know who needs to hear it.
Yeah.
And your stories especially. And I'd love for you just to give the Cliff Note version of your story of why you even got involved with Returning Home in the first place. And then I want to jump into what you're doing out here in Huntsville because you've given me a tour of this facility. I've had a chance to kind of take in what you're doing, and I think it's amazing. And you are, you know, I mean, Huntsville is just about, as the crow flies, about 25 miles from downtown Fayetteville, straight out 45 or 412, and then you connect with Business 412. So you're part of this area here if you think of the bubble that is Northwest Arkansas. So I'd love for you just to share with our audience, just orient them to who Nick Robbins is, and then let's just jump into Returning Home.
Yeah. So I grew up bouncing around from Iowa and Illinois, and at a very young age, I struggled with anxiety. I moved 17 times by the time I was 17 years old, so I was always on to the next. And so I was looking for some connection and looking to feel normal. And so I, at 12 years old, started doing drugs and drinking and hanging around with the wrong people that were also doing that. And a very short amount of time later, age of 15, I was no longer welcome in my home. And 2 years later, I was 17 years old. I was arrested for 2 armed robberies. Went to prison in Iowa for 7.5 years. While I was there, men and women from the community came in and invested in me. And when I was of no value, when I was a horrible return on investment, they just kept coming in on loving on me. And so much so that it gave me belief in myself that I had never had before. And they shared the love of Christ with me. They shared a hope that I hadn't experienced. And so then when I got out, I just knew that was such a special thing to be able to just wake up every day and invest in others. And so that's what I pursued and been doing it for 15 years now. So working in the area of either prison or reentry. And now we're really focusing a lot of our efforts on individuals that just go to county jail for a very short amount of time with some low-level charges. And so it makes sense to me every day to go to work. And I've surrounded myself with an amazing staff. Majority of them have experienced incarceration themselves and are just out here crushing it and leading by example to help repair lives and restore families.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, just for our audience purpose, what maybe can you give some facts and figures so people can understand the depth of the incarceration challenge that we have, even here in Arkansas, right? I mean, I was familiar with it up in New England, in Boston, where I lived, in the state of Massachusetts, as well as the state of Rhode Island. But I'd love for you just to kind of help people understand how incarceration impacts our community.
Yeah. So nationally, 1 in 3 people have been arrested.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to go far to be able to, connect with somebody that's been impacted by the criminal justice system. And, for us, we really try to separate that aspect. Like, because if you go like, hey, we work with people that have been incarcerated, that's like this negative stigma.
Yeah.
But instead, like that common denominator is trauma, mental illness, low level of education. And those things manifest themselves into an addiction. So you're seeking to escape trauma, or you're seeking to escape a lower functioning individual, low level education. So you have less opportunities. And if you got less opportunities, your life isn't going as well and you're struggling. And the more you struggle, there's a thing that's called a poverty mindset. When you get trapped in that poverty mindset, you start to value things differently and you lose a lot of opportunities. And so what we seek to do is to know we have one of the biggest county jails in the state of Arkansas.
Yeah.
And it's, 20 minutes from one of the other biggest the county jails in the state. So knowing that Washington, Benton County have a lot of folks incarcerated. And so that means that's a lot of hurting folks. That's a lot of people that need help. And oftentimes these individuals, like when you think of like a judge, they don't have many tools in the tool belt. It's either sending somebody to incarceration, it's charging them fines and fees, or it's putting them on supervision. And so not one of those 3 things is going to help that individual solve any of the issues that cause the problem.
Yeah.
So we're just never addressing the problem. And not to get too deep into it, but the whole purpose of corrections itself back in the 1800s was actually to minimize the negative impact of crime on somebody's life that committed the crime.
Yeah.
So originally in
and
the
reduce
1800s,
recidivism.
Yeah. In 1800s, when you committed a crime, you had a physical punishment. And so if you were missing a finger or a piece of your ear or you had a specific burn, those represented specific charges that you've committed.
Right.
And so then when you go into the community, they wouldn't house you, they wouldn't hire you, and they wouldn't welcome you in. And so what they said was the Mormons came together and they said, hey, let's create, there's Quakers, let's create a system of penance. And so you will go in isolation and you will, serve your penance, but we will not have any physical punishment so that no one will ever know that you've done anything wrong. And they went as far as, Randy, so this is in Philly, right? Right, right in the middle of Philly.
Sure.
So they put a hood over their head when they walked them into the prison because they didn't want the guards to even see their face. They didn't want anybody in the community to know that they were doing time there. And so they'd walk them in the backside of their cell. And so they'd squat down and they'd crawl into the cell. And when they walk into the cell, there's this big metal door. And at the bottom is this little bitty hole that they could get food handed to them through this slot because they didn't want the guards to see their faces. They didn't want the other individuals incarcerated to see their faces. And they started to use numbers instead of their names. So you'd be inmate 1. And it was to protect your identity. So the day you got out, put the hood back over your head, they crawl back out of that cell, walk to the other side of the fence, They'd take the hood off, and you'd be standing in the middle of Philly with the idea that you did your penance and nothing from your past is going to hinder you from a different future. Or if it does, you'll be that much more likely to reproduce the past result that we don't want to happen again.
Yeah.
And so we went so far since, I think it was 1829 when Eastern State Penitentiary opened, to where now incarceration is the punishment.
Yeah.
That's the stigma. That's that figure that's, burnt into their skull to where you're never going to get past it. And so, man, the heart of returning home is create an environment that can set a new culture and a new path for an individual to heal and to grow. Wow.
Man, you unpack so much there. There's a lot, when you think about it. And I think of how returning home, when you think about the depth of the incarceration problem, not just here in Northwest Arkansas, but just in our country in general, sometimes you feel like you're emptying the ocean with a teaspoon.
Yeah.
I use that as an analogy sometimes when you think, man, this is futile. This is never going to get fixed. What is your prime motivation as you've been doing this, given that, understanding of things? Sometimes you just feel like, how is Nick Robbins going to make a difference in all this? Matter of fact, Nick Robbins is super flawed and Nick Robbins has his own problems. Absolutely. How am I going to help these other people get through this season of incarceration, get their forgiveness and be re-entered back into society as productive members of society?
Yeah. Yeah. We just have to do it for the individual. And we just never know what that ripple effect is going to look like, Randy. If an individual has a child, I've got some past clients that have children that never knew what their parents' past was.
Yeah.
And the likelihood of them experiencing incarceration is so minimal because that's just no longer the expectation of their family. But their parents were incarcerated. Like that was the family business.
Yeah.
And to where we stepped in, we intervened, and then it ended right there. And so especially for the alternative guys that we're working with, they're what the jail calls the frequent flyers. So it's the ones they know about.
Right.
Like they know everybody in their family. They know their brother. Oh, your brother down the road.
Frequent flyers.
Yeah. And so these guys, we did a study once and we took all of their incarcerations and they averaged 15 times incarcerated.
Wow.
For every individual. And so to know that, hey, this could be your last time. And right now, so for the county jail, somebody getting out of county and the likelihood of them going back nationally is 90%. Because the tough thing is with the county jail is it's not like a programmatic setting. It was never created to be that. It's to hold detainees to be able to work through the legal system. So there's no expectation that they have the resources, the manpower, or the experience to try to change somebody's lives in that environment. So the likelihood of you're going to come back 90% of the time, and we have been running this alternative program, taking men from Washington and Madison County, low-level charges, out of county jail. We go pick them up, we bring them, and they're sentenced to us for 4 months in our program. And they're actually averaging staying for 6 months. So what is seen originally, maybe in society's eyes, that it's a punishment, that they're going, hey, I need more of this. I'm seeing so much progress in my life. So they go back 33% of the time. So we've been able to cut it down, a third of, yeah. So just knowing that we've been able to impact our community. These are our people. And like, what's so interesting is some folks would just incarcerate them, lock them up no matter what. But a lot of people say, hey, those people in county jail, that's our community. Like that's our community members. We need to help them.
Yeah.
And so there's a very unique thing that happens. If that individual gets sentenced to do state time, they then change their registration to now it's a state offender being held by the county jail. And those same people that say, hey, we need, that's our community, immediately go, why are we paying to house state offenders? That's the same person.
Right.
They're just in a different position of their criminal justice time frame. And so we kind of forget about that. We kind of set them aside. So this really came from COVID when they were trying to release a bunch of people out of county jail. And, we got invited into the conversation and just started saying like, hey, for a lot less money, I could actually house them. I could, they go to class 5 days a week. They go to counseling every week. These are licensed counselors. They do case management every week and they work a full-time job that we provide them. And we provide transport to and from all their court cases because just because somebody gets out of county jail doesn't mean they don't have 3 different charges in 3 different districts. And so they still have a lot that they're, working through. And so we're able to do that and do it at a high level to where that individual is doing things for the first time ever.
Ever, yeah.
I had a guy in tears going, Nick, I took a screenshot of my RVest account that had money in it, and I sent it to my family so they knew like I had a bank account and a job. First time. Guys 20 years old and just have never, hitting things they've never experienced. And we've got a fatherhood program that's intertwined for both our locations. So we got 75 guys in Springdale and 24 guys here. And so they do fatherhood. And so we're having conversations about their kids that they had never really had before. And, people think, well, I'm a parent because I had a kid. And I go, yeah, but I need you not just be a parent, I need you to be a father. And there's depth to that. And I'm going to teach you this depth. And so then, we work on like, how do you communicate? And we'll have them like write a letter, and then we'll process that letter. But like, hey, this sounds more about you than them. Like, that's not where it needs to be in their court.
Yeah.
And having guys for the first time, like reaching out to their kids in a long time. And then every once in a while you get somebody reach back and go, where you been? Like, I have no idea where you've been for X amount of years.
Yeah.
Like, thank you for reaching out. And we did these family day events. And so we average about 30 people coming in to see them, families, a bunch of kids swimming and jumping on bouncy houses, and in a very healthy way, spending time with their kids. And so then, that's not like hypothetical stuff. Like I've worked in programs in the prison system.
Yeah.
And everything you're doing is hypothetical. It's like, hey, when you get money, you should manage it wisely. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, but you don't have money.
Yeah.
And so when we're telling them how to be a father, we're then following up after the event, like, so how'd that go? How'd those conversations go? Did you still feel pretty awkward, or you feel uncomfortable, or how'd your kid do? And, we pump them up with a bunch of sugar. So them kids are good. And so they're running around having a lot of fun. So what's so fun about the alternative program in particular is this is their community. Their parents are here. Their kids are here. Their significant others here. The jobs that we're getting them will be jobs they keep. The apartments. So we just had 2 guys graduate, and I got 2 guys graduating in the next 2 weeks. And we got a guy signing for an apartment on Friday. And so like, we're talking about mattresses and, okay, make sure you get sheets and like, just we're doing life together. I've never once had a conversation be like, hey, don't commit armed robbery.
Right.
Like we're not dealing with the crime side of things. We're dealing with the life side of things. Like, do you have a budget? Are you sticking with it? I make them, like, for their fines and fees, send me receipts. Like, I need to know you paid that, because that's your freedom that you're jeopardizing if you don't. And so just doing life with people is a lot of fun. It's hectic, but it's a lot of fun.
Well, and I can only imagine that it must be hectic. It has to be, on the one side, it's got to be really satisfying, as you said, to see those success stories.
Yeah.
And then the flip side of it is, man, that, your constant, I would imagine your constant prayer is, I don't want to see this person back here again.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want them to fall into that statistic, and I'm using air quotes now, that so many do.
Absolutely.
And as I was sitting here listening to you unpack all of this and tell such a beautiful story, I'm reminded a lot of times we tend to, when people make mistakes, we tend to cast them off in a lot of instances. Yeah. And especially if they make a mistake that's so egregious that it finds them in or part of the criminal justice complex. And the reality is that for a lot of people, yet there is a small subset of that, people that are what we call like career criminals.
Right.
That's just what they do.
Yeah.
They know right from wrong, and they've chosen wrong. But then there are people that just get caught up in circumstance or a bad decision. One bad decision can ultimately change your life. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how, so often we, and I say society, is quick to label these individuals. And I think we need to have more patience, and we also need to have more humility around this process and be willing to see individuals for the human beings that they are.
Yeah.
And I know I'm going deep here, and I want people to understand the value of a program like Returning Home, because, I wish you had 1,000 beds, because that still wouldn't be enough to meet the need.
Yeah.
But even 24 is a great start.
Yeah.
And that's 24 lives that fundamentally, you're changing, because as I was writing down some of my notes, one of the things that you guys are doing are breaking generational curses, especially for people whose parents have been incarcerated, or been in jail or had problems with the law. And these kids, that's all they know.
Yeah.
So they just start the cycle over again. And when you're able to kind of break that and move them into a place of healing, both mentally, physically, spiritually, it then allows these individuals to really have an impact on society in the way that we all expect people to have.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we detach it from that bigger picture, right? Every person that we lose to the prison system is a productive member of society that could be serving you a meal at a restaurant, could be a salesman knocking on your door, selling you something that you really need, could be somebody that's going to college and getting a degree in a subject matter that's providing life-saving research. You know, I mean, it just, you fill in the blanks. It could be all of that.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we have to stop and kind of think about that. And so even with the small indentation that you're able to do with returning home is making a difference and can make a difference with our community, especially here in Northwest Arkansas.
Yeah, because we know if we have a really good idea of who's going to be incarcerated next, it's who's incarcerated today.
Yeah.
And so we have an opportunity, like, here they are.
Yeah.
What are we going to do with them? Like, what's the investment going to look like? Because I would say my frustration always is when somebody goes, man, I think those people need help. I just don't want them to be helped near me.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Yeah.
So you really don't want them to get help,
right?
But you're probably the same person complaining when somebody commits a crime. I'm like, well, if you weren't a part of the process of giving them other opportunities in life, then what do you expect? There is, I would say, as of right now, we probably have about half of our guys that are currently here were homeless before they were arrested. And so just imagine you don't have a home. You have a low-level education. You're struggling with mental illness. And somebody just says, I just wish you weren't doing those things. But no one's willing to come alongside you. Oftentimes somebody feels comfortable handing them something. Like, here, let me give you some money, or here, let me get you some groceries. Well, my issue isn't groceries or money, because I've had both of those things and it didn't change anything. Like, we need holistic change. And so to bring them into, our homes and to be able to say, like, here's the expectations. And what's so special about this population is how quick, if they walk into a specific culture, how they meet that culture.
Yeah.
There's no cursing in my property.
Yep.
And the people, if you knew who was in my property, you'd be like, wait, they don't curse? No, because I do not. We don't allow that.
Yeah.
And so, our population struggles with addiction. Every one of them was using. Over the last 8 months, we've had 2 failed drug tests, and we drug test multiple times a week. So, we're talking about hundreds of tests. And the reason is because we say, guess what? We don't use drugs here. Oh, okay. So when you think about that, you're going, so you just mean they need a culture strong enough to where somebody is showing them how to live a life differently? Yeah. Well, then why were they doing it in the first place? Because that's what somebody showed them.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a guy that's here, his family, in the last 6 weeks, his mom has been out of jail and back to jail, and his dad's at jail, went to jail, and just in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting him down and I'm trying to tell them, like, you can have something more. And he's like, well, what do you even mean? And I'm going, this doesn't have to be your future. He goes, but that is what our future, like, we asked him about, like, what do you know about finances and saving? And he goes, well, we were taught, make sure you have enough bail money in your pocket, because you're always going to get arrested. And as long as you got bail money, then you can keep doing what you're doing.
Wow.
And you're just like, whoa, just knowing that our population, it's been created. Oftentimes it's not a choice. It's what they were taught. It's what they learned. It was what's around them. And so they don't even think the things are wrong. Like, we have them do daily chores. And it's funny because they're like, well, I don't want to do that. I'm like, not only are you going to do this one chore, I'm preparing you for when you get your own apartment and you got to do all the chores.
Right.
All right, what? I have my own apartment? Yeah, if you do this, this, and this. And we don't control their money, but we sit down with every single week and we go through it. It's, okay, what do you got in savings? What'd you spend money on? I need to see all the receipts. I've got multiple guys in this building, has thousands of dollars in the bank. And, last 3 guys got their own apartment.
Yeah.
And these apartments are not cheap.
Oh, I know.
Even in Huntsville.
It's
so expensive.
I got it.
And to know that they're becoming self-sustaining. So it's not just, I want you to just stop committing crimes. I want you to take this thing to a whole new level.
Yeah.
Like I've had past clients that are business owners. I've got that have helped us out a lot in business situations.
Sure.
I've got clients that are taking college courses that will, once they get that degree, make a lot more money than I ever will. I'm like, they're hitting high levels because an expectation has been created and then an environment that supported it. So I didn't just tell you what I think you should do. Like, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. Instead of going, this is what you should do, and here's how I'm going to support you in that every single day.
Right.
And if there's a slip up, I got you. Like, that's what I'm here for. And it's fun. Like, we just had our Thanksgiving meal and, got graduates that come back. And on this Friday, we're having our Christmas meal. And we got a guy that's graduating Friday. He's like, but I'm coming back. I was like, well, why wouldn't you just stay for the meal and then leave?
Right, right, yeah.
He's like, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
and so we want this to be a family. And so we call them all brothers. And so, we know that we're their family. And oftentimes, like, if they mess up, they'll come and like, I disappointed my family and I'm really sorry.
Yeah. As I'm listening, you talk about that and obviously the male prison population is different than the female prison population. Are there programs like Returning Home for Women?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm familiar with like Teen Challenge and some other programs like that have done amazing work all across the country. I'm curious to know if there are programs like Returning Home for Women in Northwest Arkansas that you're aware of.
Yeah. So Magna Serenity is in Fayetteville.
Okay.
And then Oasis of Northwest Arkansas is in Bella Vista. Nicole's House is in Rogers. And Freedom Seekers is also in Rogers. And off the top of my head, that I mean, I know there's more, but those are the ones that I'd say I'm connected with. I know who runs those organizations, and they're doing amazing work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And I'm glad to hear that, everybody there are opportunities out there. So it's like, how do you deal with the fact of having to turn somebody away just because you don't have the capacity?
Yeah. It's very difficult. And so with the 75 beds in Springdale for the reentry, the guys coming from prison, and then the 24 beds in the alternative program. So you're talking about, 99 beds.
Yeah.
We average 3,600 applications a year. So we, and we're probably cycling 3, maybe 4 times a year. So we typically maybe around 10% on a good year that we could serve of people that request the services. And then there are some situations that because of the individual's struggle that we aren't able to serve them because we don't have the education or experience or capacity. And so that's hard too, because we know there's some folks that struggle with severe mental illness and there's really not a place for them anywhere. I mean, there's like one state hospital in Little Rock. Yeah. And that's heartbreaking because you're like, hey, I know you're not going to be successful in this environment, but I don't know what other environment to refer you to. And then same thing with some people that are trying to come here to break an addiction. It doesn't work for everybody, especially our alternative location. Like, we don't have staff here 24 hours a day. They live on site, but they're not on technically all the time. And so we have people just going like, I need to be in a room locked up and wait till this passes. I'm like, well, that's not our setup. So we know we can never serve everybody, and that's really tough. But at the same time, we've got such our hands full with the few that we are. We're like, oh, I don't think I can take any more. When you mentioned 1,000, I started sweating a little bit. I was like,
no, I get it. And I would say that if you were to, we have the thing that I say about Northwest Arkansas is that this is a very giving place, right? I mean, I get it that those of us that don't have, X amount of dollars in our bank account may struggle with giving fatigue just like anybody else would. But there is a lot of philanthropy in Northwest Arkansas, and it's pointed to a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. If you had the ear of somebody that had real means, what would you ask for? What do you think you could take, or what would you need to kind of replicate this, maybe on a little bit of a larger scale, or to get to that 1,000, you know what I'm saying? 1,000 people. Because as of right now, what you're telling me is that you're able to meet the needs of about 300 to 360 people a year. Mm-hmm. What would it mean for you to be able to reach 1,000 people a year? Because then you start to put a dent in that incarceration number in terms of recidivism.
Yeah. So for the
and we don't know who's listening now.
Yeah.
It could be there are a lot of people, and I'm not even going to mention any names, but we just have all kinds of people. Yeah. What I have seen is that there are a lot of people in Northwest Arkansas that have real means and do a lot of things, in secret or behind closed doors, which is totally fine. I mean, I don't need to put anybody on blast in terms of what they do. I have no idea what Jonelle Hunt does in her spare time or Alice Walton does in their spare time. I can only imagine that they make some things happen. They do it through their public entities, but then I've been told that things happen in private as well. And I'm not putting them out there to say them, but there's a lot of people. Yeah. It's one of the benefits of being in an area like this with so many successful companies, both startups and, Fortune 1s like Walmart. Yeah. And JB Hunt and Tyson and Simmons Foods. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Yeah. And then you have all of the largesse that was created out of what Sam Walton built. Right. And all the friends of Sam. Yeah. And all those folks that have really done well for themselves and for their children and their children's children. There are people that are all constantly looking for ways to impact their community. Yeah. And sometimes in ways that are so measurable, but we don't discuss them. Right. Yeah. So for us to house one guy, so one bed, it's $60 a day. And knowing for the county jail, it's $75 a day. Yeah. To have somebody lay on a mat on the floor. And so we think $60 a day is a very realistic investment. But at the same time, especially because you're also including, that $75 a day is just to house them and feed them. Yep. And I'm assuming medical care. Yeah. But I don't know how much education is added to that. I don't know how much job preparation is added to that. So for $60, you kind of get it all. Yeah, absolutely. You get everything. They're working full time. They're paying their taxes. They're, becoming self-sustaining. So it kind of, to resemble like another 24 bed facility is $525,000 a year to run it. Okay. But that doesn't cover the setup costs. Yeah. And so this year for us, Randy, it's been rough. Yeah. Because so people look like, oh, you guys brought in a lot of money, the last few years or whatever. Everything we're bringing in, we're investing in the programming. Yeah. So we've created a foundation. This new building, this new property in Huntsville is the foundation going forward of all the people coming next. And so we're trying to do something very similar with an apartment that, we call our aftercare facility. So our graduates have a place to live. So that next step that still has case management, still has counseling. So we still have that oversight and the support that they need. And so, that's going to hold 24 guys as well. And so that's a huge, we had to get loans for both properties. So for us, if there was some very wealthy person, it would really be getting our debt down. Okay. Because then we can spread out our resources every year instead of going towards this foundation, which we knew when we made the decision is very strategic of going, we need to be building what our clients need. And so, originally they need that culture, they need that heavy program, but then they need that next step. And so we're building that in Springdale. I'm actually going to a meeting tomorrow at 3:00 with the city of Springdale, and hopefully we'll get the go ahead to start building that space. So that's a big piece to ever, expand. We really had to have a commitment that justifies, and we got the resources to start the alternative program from Washington County's ARPA funds, which are now, depleted. Sure. So there's no second chance at that. I understand. And so going forward, we're going, what is sustainability looking like for us is to kind of invest what we have today to reduce our costs tomorrow so that we keep doing our work. Because the tough thing with nonprofits is the people that give, the organizations, the foundations, their desires and focuses come and go to different things. And usually it's cultural, like, hey, what's the hot button thing? And so then money gets thrown that direction. And we're like, wait a second, we needed that money to keep doing what we were doing. Right. And so we know one day it's going to be gone. And, I've been in the nonprofit world for 15 years. There's ebbs and flows, and you have good years and you have tough years. This year, specifically 2023, has been a tough one. And so our board and the leadership's just really focused on sustainability for the program so that can continue to provide that sustainability for the individual. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I would hope that somebody's listening to this that has ideas and ways that they can help you and provide some additional assistance and resources, right? I'm sure it's probably not a resource that you would turn away at this point in time. I mean, in terms of what you need.
Yeah.
If somebody did want to connect with you and to maybe learn a little bit more about what you're doing, maybe come out here and visit you in Huntsville and, see this facility, this amazing facility and what you've done. I mean, I was driving here and I was like, man, where am I going? And as soon as I got here, it kind of opened up. And I mean, you've got your own compound. It's the only way that I can describe it. And it's the kind of compound that has expansion capabilities. Yeah. I could see this whole thing growing out here,
Absolutely.
14 plus acres of land and what you're able to do and serve the needs of people here in Madison County and beyond, I think is certainly impressive. How can people get connected with you if they hear this and this really moves them to say, you know what, I don't know how, but I want to support Nick and the rest of the returning home family. Yeah.
Best way to connect would be emailing me, nick@returninghomenwa.com, or just going on to our website, returninghomenwa.com, and you go into that message section and that gets sent right to my email. So either way, we'll get connected if you go on the website or email me directly. Definitely willing for any ideas. I personally, my life was changed because people were willing to invest in me as an individual. And the only reason for the last 8 years returning home has been successful is because people have been willing to invest in the next man coming.
Right.
And it's so special. And I tell a lot of the guys when they arrive, I said, people wrote checks. People gave those shoes you're wearing. People gave that t-shirt you're wearing. They didn't know you. And only thing they knew was the worst thing you did. And they loved you so much that they prepared a way for you. That mattress, that bed frame, that pillow you're laying your head on, somebody prayerfully gave that.
Yeah.
Resources to provide that for you. And they don't even know you. Like, how special are you that somebody was paving the way before you ever arrived? Like, I'm pretty excited to have you because you must be special. Or why would this be here for you?
Yeah.
And most of our population, they just don't believe that about themselves.
Yeah.
They don't. And I love sitting down and casting a vision for them. It's going like, hey, we're going to have a conversation about visions and my vision for you. And I want you to start putting some input in it. I want to talk about the things that you're going to change forever. And you're going to connect with your kid again. And you're going to hold down this job. And one of these days, you're going to be a supervisor because I know I'm going to have more guys that need jobs. And I'm going to call you and you better hire my guys. You know what I mean? Just start throwing this at them. They're like, I never thought I could hold a job. I never thought I could contact my daughter. I never thought, and so we're in the hope business and it's good because everyone needs it.
Absolutely. You laid it out nicely there, Nick. You're right about that. Everybody does need hope. And I really appreciate you, not only just bringing me out here, because at first I was like, oh man, I've done the story of returning home, but then as you said, no, you got to see this place. I mean, it's special. And I'm really glad that you persisted and encouraged me to come out here. And I was going to do it anyway, because I love you and your wife. You guys are just amazing. As I said, amazing folks. And I'm glad that I could see it with my own eyes. And I certainly encourage anybody listening to this to get out here and check it out. And
absolutely.
Most of the time I'm recording episodes now at KUAF because of our partnership, but it is nice every now and then to get out of the studio and physically go someplace and set up the microphone and just have a conversation. So I really appreciate you doing that with me today and kind of sharing your story. And I do want to encourage anybody listening to this, go back. I'll put this in the show notes, the link to episode 65 of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast, and go check it out and listen to the whole story and listen to what Nick has been doing at Returning Home in Springdale. And that was a couple of years ago, but most of that hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Just the faces have changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the stories are still the same. And people need help in our community, especially those that are less fortunate and have been through some form of incarceration. They need a second chance. They need a leg up. They need a smile and a, hey, you can get through this. And Nick is doing an amazing job. Nick and his whole team are doing an amazing job of breaking generational curses, especially as it pertains to incarceration, drug addiction, and so many other areas that impact all of us. So I really want to encourage you to figure out how you can support Returning Home in any way, shape, or form, in a small way, financially, or in just giving of your time and your talent to them, or ideas. Maybe you have an amazing idea after listening to this that you think could be a real blessing to them. Please, please, please be willing to share it with Nick. And as I always say, Northwest Arkansas is comprised of some amazing people that really do have a heart for helping others. And that's what I tell people all the time when someone comes to me and says, what's so special about Northwest Arkansas? Why should I even consider moving here? And I'm like, it's a little different than a lot of other places that you've been. And you've been in Illinois, you've been in other places. Yeah. You can agree with that.
Absolutely.
Am I right? Yeah. So, I mean, so I'm not blowing smoke, folks. I mean, this is real, and you just have to see it for yourself, especially for those of you listening that are thinking about moving here. Trust me when I say it, we'll leave the light on for you. We are welcoming you with open arms, and there's all kinds of programs that will serve all of your needs, including something like returning home and Nick Robbins and his team and what they're doing. So, Nick, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Randy. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. Well, folks, that's another episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. To learn more about us or to read or download the show notes from today's episode, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. You can listen to this podcast and sign up for our free newsletter to keep up with us and all things NWA. Sign up today. You can subscribe to the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast wherever you listen to it. And please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Remember, our podcast comes out every Monday, rain or shine. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and we'll see you back here next week for another new episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.